Good morning. We all love a good fail video, don't we? I mean, when my boys pull up some video and a guy is getting smacked in the crotch, it's like, that makes my day. How about you? It just works for us. However, I think there are some things that might be a little bit better than fail videos, and that is when there is a picture that was snapped just at the precisely right moment that allows your imagination to play out the rest of the scene, and you know it's going to end in failure. I'll give you some examples up here. We're going to just fly through these really quick. See what I'm saying? Okay, look at the next one. Oh. I mean, you see, you don't see the failure happening. You just anticipate it. You know it's going to happen. Next one. Woo. All right. Your imagination is running wild. Let's see the next one there. That's one of my favorites. It just takes you a second to look at that. That guy is going to get smacked with a sledgehammer. Next one there. I love this one. Look at all three individuals on there. The kid driving is freaking out. The kid falling is freaking out. And grandma is going to break a hip. Like, that's what's going to happen here. All right, this next one might be a little bit different, okay? This isn't necessarily on the internet. A little boy, and he's got some boo-boos on his nose. And so can your imagination just even fathom how those got there? Yeah, you can only look at this for like a second. Go. Go to the next one. You know how your mom, get rid of that. Take it down, RJ. You know how your mom has told you, don't run with scissors, you'll poke your eye out. Apparently you should not run with a fork, you'll poke your nose out. Like, I was gonna get my nose pierced until I saw that. You don't, in those pictures besides the last one, you didn't necessarily see the failure happening. You just knew it was going to happen. You could anticipate it. You could predict it, that they were going to fall flat on their face. Do you have a moment of failure that you wish you could take back? I just heard, it was a rhetorical question, but I just heard yes in here. Every time you think back to that moment of failure, you get overwhelmed sometimes with shame, with guilt, with regret. And today we're going to investigate the moment of personal failure in the life of Peter. If you were going to ask him, like, do you remember your moment of failure, the defining moment, he would say yes automatically, and his thoughts and regret and shame would go back to this moment that we're going to study as you turn in your Bibles or on your apps to Luke chapter 22. Luke 22, verse 31. The context, as you're turning to Luke 22, the context is Jesus has been talking about death. He's been talking about death repeatedly because he's getting closer and closer to the cross. Peter and the other disciples, they're not quite getting it all the time, and they break out into arguments about who's the greatest among them. You've heard these types of things before. Jesus sets them straight. And he lays down the law with them. And then in this moment, it seems like he pulls Peter aside and he has a private conversation with him. I have no idea if the other disciples heard it or not, but Peter definitely knew what Jesus was saying. In verse 31, he says, Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you've turned back, go, strengthen your brothers. But he replied, Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison. I'm ready to die for you. I'll go with you to prison or to death. And Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you'll deny 3 times that you even know me. I want you to notice a few things in this text. First of all, the way Jesus addresses Peter. He calls him Simon. And notice he says it twice, and he does that for emphasis of the things that he's about to say next. He doesn't call him Peter. Jesus changed his name to Peter. He told him, you are the rock that I'm going to build my church on. Gives him the keys to the kingdom. You're Peter. You're strong. You're bold. But in this moment of prediction of what's going to happen, he calls him Simon. He's giving Peter a clue that he is not as strong as he thinks he is. He's not the stable rock that he so thinks he is. So Simon, Satan's coming at you. A better translation might be, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat. He's gotten permission to sift you like wheat. A very similar story is in the book of Job, the first couple of chapters there, where Satan gets permission to persecute and torment Job. That's what's happening to Peter here. Satan wants permission is to see what Peter is made of. Oh, you're a rock. You're going to sink. Satan's goal is to get Peter and the other disciples to soon follow in the footsteps of Judas rather than Jesus. That's what he's going after. Now, Jesus prayed that Peter's faith won't fail, but he's equally clear that something's going to happen to Peter that is going to shake his commitment that he made. He's just vowed to go to death for him. He'd go to prison for him. He'd go to the ends of the earth for him. And Jesus says, not so fast. Peter's going to fail. Now, Peter disagreed. He pledges his allegiance passionately. He's going to fall flat on his face in spiritual failure. Now later, if you keep fast forward a little bit to Luke 22:54, verse 54, there's been a tussle that has ensued as Jesus is getting arrested, and while they're arresting him and hitting him, Peter, he sees this as his opportunity to show Jesus his full commitment that he would do anything for him. And so he pulls out a sword, and I think he tries to cut off the head of a guy named Malchus, one of the soldiers that are there. But Malchus pulls his head back in some way. He dodges the sword, and Peter lops off his ear, and he cuts his ear off, and Jesus has to pick it up, and he's like, oh, sorry about that, puts it back on the guy and heals him right there. Notice Peter takes out a sword, and he's willing to fight for the life of Jesus. But at this point, he's not willing to lay down his life for the sake of Christ. Jesus is not asking us to fight for him. Fighting is easy. He's asking us to die to ourselves. That's the hard part. Many of us in here would say, oh yeah, I die for Jesus. Well, will you die to yourself? That's what he's asking for. Then later, verse 54, then seizing him, they led him away. They took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed. Notice, at a distance. Didn't want to get too close. And when some of them there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard, and they had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl, a little servant girl, saw him seated there in the firelight. She's not a threat whatsoever. She looked closely at Peter and said, this man was with him. This man was with Jesus, but he denied it. Woman, I don't know him. What are you talking about? You're crazy. No. A little later, someone else saw him and said, you're also one of them. Man, no, I'm not. Just leave me alone. I'm just warming myself by the fire. No, it's not me. About an hour later, another asserted, certainly this fellow was with him, for he's a Galilean. Another gospel says that his accent was giving him away. Like some of you Southerners here, we just know where you're from. They knew that Peter was from northern Galilee. His accent was giving away. That's you. Peter replied, man, I don't know what you're talking about. And other gospels say that Peter started calling down curses. He's cussing about it. He's saying, no, I'm not with him. I don't know him. And just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. Oh. Verse 61 just cuts to the heart. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. I wonder if it was a gaze of, I told you so, or just disappointment. Then Peter remembered the words that the Lord had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows today, you'll disown me 3 times. And he went outside and he wept bitterly. I wish there was some context. I wish there was some Greek word that I could tell you that would lighten the mood of this text. To say, oh, it's not as bad as it seems that it is. But no, it's Peter's defining moment of failure. I guess he's not as strong as he thinks he is. He's not quite the rock. And my suspicion is in a room this size, many of us have had a defining moment of failure. You've got something in your past that you regret, but you've walked away from that. You've repented of that big thing in your past. And you recognize the past is the past. It's been forgiven. It's been forgotten by Jesus. And we celebrate that victory. That is an and then moment. It's the moment of turning. You're going, okay, I'm doing something different now, and I'm leaving that old life. But what about the things that you continue to do that keep on plaguing you, that cause daily moments of failure? What do you continue to do? What do you continue to say? What do you continue to think? What do you continue to watch? What do you continue to hide that causes you to wallow in shame and perpetual filth? And my guess is most of you walked in, many of you did, with deep shame issues because of something sinful in your life right now, and you can relate to Peter because your commitments at move and your actions when you go back home do not match. And quite honestly, there's an elephant in the room today. His name is failure. And if you've been looking ahead at the schedule and the words of the day, kind of the daily theme, this is the one that you didn't want exposed. This is the word that you're saying, nope, I don't really want to talk about that. But it's the elephant in the room, and we're going to acknowledge its presence today. We're going to deal with it. And if you're a Move veteran, you know those moments like last night are powerful. You've seen those kinds of moments. You know that there's more moments like that this week that are coming up. It's just amazing to me. It's amazing how CIY Move sets you up for intense spiritual growth. And as friends of mine, I've been involved with Move for a long, long time now as a youth pastor and helping out and doing things like this. And it's amazing to me that God's hand of creative blessing is upon the men and women that work for this organization. It's amazing to me. They're just right across a creek from the campus, and they are so creative. They invent new and holy and demonstrative ways for us to discuss and visualize and participate in connecting with God. But then something happens. The grand commitment is made in front of this stage. I will never leave you, Lord. I love you, Lord. I will die for you, Lord. And you sing and you listen and you selah and you pray and you drop your rocks. And I believe that it's real. I believe that it's sincere. And I'm not mocking any of those commitments today. I do believe your heart is full on pledging allegiance to your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. But what happens when you go home? Well, we're not supposed to be talking about home today. It's Wednesday. Maybe that's your problem. Maybe it's because we haven't talked about home early enough. Because in 3 to 7 days from when you leave this campus, on average, you'll return to your failures like a dog returns to its vomit. And what's sincere today in this room becomes a distant memory tomorrow. And some of you have experienced that cycle. You failed so many times over, but I believe if you concentrate and you embrace this theme of the day of failure, that you could get it right this time. You can. And just like with Peter, Jesus has turned and he's looking straight into your heart. Move does everything that it possibly can. They do everything they possibly can, but they can only push you so far. They can only push you so far. It's the dropping of the rocks is not the end, it's just the beginning of the and then moment. It has to continue on. And the depth of your submission to Jesus must extend beyond this stage and this room and this conference. You cannot farm out your spirituality to CIY and depend on them to get you through your year. Eric, Epperson, I, Frankie, all the band, we have our own rocks we need to drop as well. The secret to overcoming repeated failure is closer than you think. It's here. You just have to ask yourself, are you holding something back? You must go what I would call, I think some of the secret to this, it's not the complete answer, but it's maybe a starting place for you. I think you must go what I'm going to call the extra 10%. Many of you will go 90%. And then that extra 10%, you're going, nope, that's mine. That's what I'm going to hold back. And so you're not going to be real with that. You're going to fluff up some generic cotton candy version of that particular sin and not tell anybody the real truth of the ugly you inside. And so it's the extra 10%. You say things like, okay, God, I'm going to give you my money. 1, church attendance. I'm going to submit to my parents. I'll submit my anxieties to you. I'm going to pray more. I'm going to work the nursery. I'm going to be kind to my siblings. I'm going to prioritize my time. I'll spend more or less time on Netflix and more time in church, whatever it might be. But don't make me give up this relationship right here. I'm just not going to do that. That's kind of my thing, Lord. Even though it's toxic, even though you know that you're going to fail and fall back into the temptation trap when you go home, you can't. No, it's not that you can't. You won't give it up. You won't go that extra 10%. You hold back in denial. God, I'll submit my mouth to you. I'll submit my Bible reading to you. I'll start reaching out to my friends. I'll be a kingdom worker. I'll stop cheating in school. I'll give you my pride. I'll give you my porn. I'll give you my cutting. I'll give you my cussing. I'll help the homeless. But don't ask me to forgive that person that has wounded me deeply. It's too much. I hate them. And I won't forgive them. You pick your poison. What's your one thing? What's that 10% that you're going, nope, I'll drop a rock. I'll participate in whatever they got going on tonight, which will be really, really cool, but this one's mine. I'm not going to give that up. With Jesus, though, I'm sorry to tell you this. It seems harsh. With him, it's all or nothing. He wants 100% or nothing. He knows that you're not as strong as you think you are. You think you're Peter. Simon, you're not as strong as you think you are. Now, when he wants the 100% and it's difficult to give it to him because in the ways that he asks us to give him that extra 10%, but I can promise you this, he doesn't want it because he wants to embarrass you. He doesn't want to do that because he wants you exposed out there for everybody to mock and laugh at. He's not trying to punish you by taking away something that you love or something that's fun. As a matter of fact, he wants the 100% not to punish you, but to protect you from your own shaming failure. This only comes with complete 100% submission. But you continue to lie to yourself. You tell yourself, I can handle it. I've got that one thing, that 10% thing right here. I've got that under control now. You can handle it? That's more foolish failure. What do you mean you can handle it? Your commitments don't work and you don't have lasting change because you were never meant to handle your sin. That's not your job. It's not yours to control. What are we doing? Just admit it. You're not as strong as you think you are. He is the only one strong enough to handle your sin. He's the only one strong enough to handle your failure because he's the only one that has no sin and has no failure. He's got none. And so he can take yours on. I can't imagine Peter's crushing heart as the nails were driven into the one that he had just denied. In his mind, in Peter's mind, it was that denial that led to Jesus' crucifixion. He had failed him completely. I could picture him sitting there saying, Jesus, I am so sorry. I'm sorry. I let you down. I've let you down so many times. And can you just see Jesus' response? It's the same response that he's giving to you. Oh, my child, you can't let me down. You can't let me down because you were never holding me up in the first place. I'm the one that holds you up. That's what Jesus says. Jesus is the one that holds you up in love. Jesus is the one that holds you up in grace. Jesus is the one that holds you up in sacrifice. And even though my failures are forgiven through the grace and blood of the cross, I still hear the shame of the rooster crowing every single day. How about you? Shame sneaks in with failure. It's sneaky. It amplifies the fear that something's wrong. Something's wrong with you. Someone's going to find out about it. Somebody's going to expose the ugly truth of what you've done. Everybody's going to see the vileness on the inside, and shame wants to define you according to your failures. And I'm sick and tired of the rooster crowing in the depths of my heart and me not letting myself off the hook, and the rooster must be silenced today. I will not be defined by my failure, and nor will you. Fail's the theme of the day, but it is not the definition of my life. But I got 10% that I need to give over today. How about you? My new friends, I want to say this as clearly as possible. Stop crucifying yourself on the cross of failure and shame. That is not your place. Climb down today. And trust me, as one that has tried over and over again, you cannot climb down on your own. It's just too hard. You can't go the extra 10% on your own. Do any of you know what a redneck U-Haul is? Sorry, it's been kind of heavy. Let's lighten the mood for a second. Y'all know what a redneck U-Haul is. I've met some of you. I know where you're from. It's the only way my family ever moved. A redneck U-Haul, you see, we can't go and afford to buy a regular U-Haul to go and move your stuff. And so you get your pickup truck and your buddy's pickup truck, you know what I'm talking about, and you pile everything that you own in the back of that truck, and you hold it down in one of three ways: bungee cords, duct tape, or twine. Those of you that are from the South, that's what, you don't say twine, you go twine. Yeah. And you pile all that stuff up there, and you get it strapped and bungee corded and duct tape, and then you just head on down the road. A redneck U-Haul. A good friend of mine, a preacher from my hometown of St. Louis, his name's Ben Merrill. He's old as dirt and he's retired now, but he told this story about a time that he was behind a redneck U-Haul. He was behind it, and he could see the whole thing just kind of wobbling, and there's tables and chairs and stuff in there, just a whole bunch of junk. And as he's driving along there, and his wife is in the back seat or in the seat next to him, they both see this table and a chair just fall off of the truck, and it just shatters into a million pieces. And Ben swerves around it, and then his wife Pat says, "Ben, stop." What? No, stop. So he stops right there in the middle of the road. She goes, "Get out. What are you talking about? Just get out of the car, go pick up their stuff." They lost their stuff, and that truck was just driving on. It didn't even realize it lost all of its furniture. And so she says, "You get out, you go pick up their furniture and get it to the curb and start putting it back together, and I'll go chase them down. I'll flag them down and tell them to come back and pick up their stuff." And so Ben's out there, and he says he looked like the old game Frogger. He's like dodging traffic, and he's picking up a table leg, and he's picking up a chair, and he's getting it over there, and he gets it all over to the side of the road, and he's like, trying to put together this cheap furniture where you gotta have that itty bitty Allen wrench, but he doesn't have that with him, and he's trying to get it together the best that he can, and he's waiting for the truck, and he's waiting for his wife, and nobody's showing up, and then finally Pat pulls around in the car, and she says, "Ben, get in the car." "What, I got their stuff. Where's the truck? What's going on?" "Just get in the car." He gets in the car, and he goes, "What's going on? Where are the people?" "Well, they weren't moving. They were bringing all that stuff to the dump. I flagged them down, and they said they're not coming to pick up trash." Shame sneaks in with your failure. Some of you brought things in here with you today to the point that you feel like worthless garbage, not even worthy for the trash heap. But there are people around you just like Ben, willing to do whatever it takes to pick up the broken pieces of your life. You have leaders last night that spoke into your lives, and they gave you new names. You want the rooster finally silenced? this week? You want him silenced for good? You want this week, you want tonight to be the defining moment to where you say, okay, I'm finally done. You're going to go that extra 10%. I firmly believe that that will only happen if you trust the people that Jesus has sent here with you. It's time to trust your leaders. If you only knew how much they loved you. If you only knew as you were off doing your activities and I was watching them finding quiet places and in detail trying to figure out what to write down, the exact right phrasing for you. And if you're struggling to climb down from the cross of shame, if you're not worthy for the dump heap, then text them absolutely right now. Let them know, pass them a note, give them the stink eye of like, hey, we need to talk and you need to talk today. Go the extra 10% with them today. Go the extra 10% if appropriate with your youth group in just a moment. Tonight can be different if you're 100%. You're not as strong as you think you are, but together you can be. And together today, it's time to create a plan for home. A detailed, specific plan, things that you have never thought of, but God has put creative, deep, wise people. And if you're going to be a fool that sits and you do not take advantage of the ones that love you deeply, then you will return to your failures like a dog returns to its vomit. But as for me, I'm not returning. I'm not going to go back to my failures. I will not be defined by it. If you want to be whole, you have to admit that you're falling apart. Failure will not be the final word of your story. You are not as strong as you think you are, but Jesus is.